We all know the story of Chernobyl, right? It's one of the most haunting disasters in modern history. But what if there was another way to look at it? A story told not through engineering reports or political blame games, but through a totally different lens. Well, today we're exploring a really unique, symbolic interpretation of that event.
And that brings us to the central question behind this whole analysis. Can a cosmic chart actually explain a human-made disaster? Now, this isn't about predicting the future. It's more about using an ancient framework to find meaning and patterns in a very modern tragedy.
So just to be super clear, what we're diving into is based on a specific Vedic astrological analysis. The source itself presents this as a symbolic reading. It's not saying this was fated to happen. Think of it more like a way of mapping the energy of that specific moment in time.
Okay, so let's get into it. For a minute, I want you to try and forget everything you know about reactor cores and safety protocols. According to this analysis, the story of Chernobyl was already being told on a cosmic scale, written in a language of planets and stars.
The first piece of this cosmic puzzle, according to the source, is the backdrop, the overall energetic environment of that night. It suggests the stage was already set for disaster by this really profound imbalance.
In the Vedic tradition, they have a name for this, Agni dosha. So Agni is the element of fire. Think raw power, transformation, heat. And a dosha is basically a fault or an imbalance. So the analysis claims that the very atmosphere of that night was charged with a severe, unstable fire fault.
And what's really fascinating here is how the source connects this ancient idea to what physically happened. A disturbed fire element, it says, leads to, well, exactly what went down at Chernobyl. Explosions, fire that can't be contained, and the release of what it calls subtle energy, which of course is what we now know as radiation.
All right, so the stage is set with this volatile fire energy. Now let's bring in the main actors in this cosmic drama. Because according to this analysis, each planet had a very specific role to play.
First up, you've got the Sun. On that night, the Sun was in the sign of Aries, which is a position of exaltation. That basically means its power was amplified, like turning the volume up to 11. The Sun is astrologically linked to the nucleus, to heat, to radiation. But with all that boosted power comes a massive risk, hubris, overload, and energy so intense it threatens to just burn through any container. Then we have Mars, the planet of action, fire, and combustion. It was in Scorpio, its home sign, which represents this kind of explosive, secret, even subterranean power. You could see the link to atomic energy, right? It's plutonic, radioactive. You can almost think of it as a hidden detonator, just sitting there with immense power, waiting for something to set it off. And then there's Saturn, also in Scorpio, which the source points to as one of the heaviest signals in the whole chart. Saturn is about structure, limits, but also karma. Its presence here points to deep, systemic errors, hidden flaws in the foundation. It represents long-term consequences, toxicity, decay, like time itself corroding a secret, fundamental flaw until it breaks.
So you have these incredibly powerful forces all lined up, an overloaded Sun, a hidden detonator with Mars, and a deep systemic flaw with Saturn. But what happens when these forces collide? Well, that's the absolute key to this entire event.
The source is really clear about this. It says the meeting of Mars and Saturn in the sky was the single most dramatic astrological signature of the Chernobyl disaster.
In Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology, this combination is so potent it actually has a name, Yama Yoga. Yama is the Vedic deity of death, so this yoga is associated with destruction, collapse, and events that are simply irreversible. It's a point of no return.
And this really illustrates the core tension perfectly. You've got the explosive, firing, outward-pushing energy of Mars crashing head-on against the rigid, brittle structure represented by Saturn. It's a powerful cosmic metaphor for a sudden, violent explosion happening because of a deep, unyielding structural error. Fire meets pressure.
But what about the human cost in all of this? The analysis doesn't just look at the mechanics of the explosion. It also zooms in on the planet that represents the people, the public, caught in the devastating aftermath.
That planet is the moon. In astrology, the moon often represents the public, our collective emotional state. On that night, the moon was in Capricorn, a sign ruled by the heavy, restrictive influence of Saturn. This placement made the moon cold, vulnerable, and a perfect reflector of Saturn's themes, collective trauma and, chillingly, long-term contamination.
So, in this interpretation, the state of the moon in the chart is a direct mirror of the immense physical and emotional suffering the population would have to endure. It's like a long, cold shadow being cast over generations of people.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together now. We've got the environment, the key players, the collision. Let's see what the source describes as the full karmic signature of the event.
The analysis adds one final layer of detail using something called Nakṣatras, which are like finer subdivisions of the zodiac. The sun was in Kritika, a nakshatra tied to uncontainable fire. Mars and Saturn were in Scorpio, activating nakshatras linked to a failure of cooperation and the heavy karmic price you pay for arrogance.
So here's the complete story, laid out in 4 steps. First, you have the overload of power from the sun. Second, the hidden, systemic flaw pointed to by Saturn. Third, the detonation, the trigger, from that explosive Mars-Saturn conjunction. And fourth, the collective price, paid by the people and reflected by the suffering moon.
This quote from the source material really sums up the entire analysis perfectly. It frames the disaster as this karmic event where a fundamental force of nature, fire, finally broke the limits of human control, and a cosmic timekeeper, Saturn, showed up to collect the debt.
And that leaves us with this final question to think about. Whether you see this as some kind of literal cosmic blueprint for tragedy or a deeply powerful symbolic story, this analysis frames Chernobyl as something more than just a technical failure. It paints it as a timeless, epic tale of power, hidden flaws, and the inevitable consequences of human hubris.